Hey y'all, Charlie and Ben here, and we really want to meet you in person.
And you have the opportunity to do that on Friday, June 27th in Provo, Utah at the Utah Valley Convention Center. We're hosting a podcast live event as part of the Gather Conference. This part of the conference is free, and we're going to be taking questions. We've got a few special guests, and it's going to be a hoot and a half.
We really hope you're there, and also totally consider coming to the Gather Conference itself. It's going to be an amazing lineup, and the last 2 years has been so transformative for so many people.
Yeah, you can register at gather-conference.com.
See you soon. Hello and welcome back to All Out in the Open. This week we have another Out and About episode, and these are so fun because our co-host Yesse Wilson takes us on this global tour of the LGBTQ experience, what it's like to be gay in the church.
And today, Yesse takes us to England to visit with his friend James. I love this episode. I loved his experiences, and I think you'll enjoy it.
And Ben also loves the south of England. He's been talking about it very emphatically.
Brighton is beautiful.
And that's where James lives now. So
everyone should go. It's amazing.
We hope you love the episode.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Out and About, where we're going to go on a journey around the world to hear the different stories of members of the church. Today, we are crossing the pond for the very first time. We've been doing a lot of time in the Pacific, but we're just going to cross the other ocean now and take our first journey over into Europe. Today, we're going to be meeting with my friend James Grant, who's coming to us from England. So, since most of our audience is American, we might need some help with that geography. So why don't I turn the time over to James? Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and where you're at?
So I'm currently in England, sunny England. It was actually sunny for once today, actually. I'm not lying. So I'm originally from the north of England in a place called Yorkshire, which is the most beautiful place in the world. And I now live in the south of England, sadly, as for those who don't know, there's a big divide in England between the north and the south, and we don't like each other. But I digress. But yeah, so I'm currently in England, and yeah.
Yes, we do have an understanding of the north and south getting along. We had a few of those about that. Many films have been made. So, James, tell us a little bit about who you are, how you identify, where are you at on your current journey of life?
So I am James, as it said. I identify as gay. I am 24. Currently very single. I'm working at the moment as a control automation electrical engineer. I am fully active in the church, and currently I'm serving on the State High Council in the state I'm in, which is an interesting experience to say the least.
24-year-old in the State High Council in England. Now that's fascinating. I think that was one of the things that when we were talking, I was just like, did I hear that right? Like, I'm pretty sure you probably had the sentence.
Yes, when they called me, I had a bit like, wait a minute, are we in the right meeting here? Because this is not what I expected to have this meeting about.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about now, what is like the culture like in England of the church? Because the reason I'm asking that question is, like, I think there was a point where, like, they called like the apostles' mission, the prophet mission, is if you got called over there because so many of the church's presidents have been called to England, and there's just been a long history there. So what is it like? It's kind of a bit of a general question. What is it like being culturally in the church over there?
It's interesting to say this because there's such an old presence of the church, or relatively old, and because prophets came over and apostles came over in the 1800s, and it kind of exploded. It was one of the fastest, like, baptizing hundreds and hundreds. And at one point, there was more members of the church in the UK than the US. It was like there were so many people in the church and literally baptizing towns and towns in the past. And then there was a great exodus of everybody who left the pioneers, and the church, like, the population of the church plummeted. Because the only people who stayed around were the people who couldn't afford to go over and couldn't afford to move to the US. So it dropped loads. And then since then, it's been slowly grown and grown and grown. And then at the minute, it's kind of, from what I noticed as serving in the church, and say I can't notice that it is starting to boom a bit, especially with the younger generation. So it's quite cool how it's but because of the change of it, some places are still a little bit old-fashioned in the church, a bit slow to grow, if that makes sense, and to change. Where some are a lot more expansive, growing and stuff like that. So it's depending where you are, it can be a pretty different experience, just depending which ward you're in, which state you're in, to how everything is.
Of course, it'll be different in different areas. So I'm wondering, like right now, what I've seen statistically across the world, but particularly in Europe, we're having a lot of these cathedrals that are gigantic and been there for centuries that are quite empty right now. That there's quite the religious decline. Is there still? Are we feeling that in the church over there in the parts of England that you resided in, or are you seeing it pretty much staying the same level as you remembered it?
I think, if I remember correctly, there's a statistic that came out recently, and it's that England is one of the only places in Europe that has actually had a growth in the membership in the church, as there's literally been, since COVID and all that time, there's literally been, in the UK, there's been a change back to religion, because at one point it was very much like, because of all the history of England, it went very, not anti-religion, but religion was a bit of a taboo subject, and now it's kind of, especially in the younger generations, like, the church attendance is going up, either in most Christian churches, it's going up. So it's quite an interesting experience when, especially as going around, like, I think I was talking to one of them in the stateside council meeting recently, and we were talking about a ward, and they had 26 non-members out of church in 1 week, and which, as a kid, it was like lucky if we had one, if that makes sense. Like in some of the wards. So now it's like 26, and that's not an anomaly either. That's common to sometimes hear a lot of church wards having a fair bit of a lot of interest in the church. In my parents' ward, they now have to have 2 sets of sister missionaries in the ward, because their set of sister missionaries are just over to work. There's too much work for them to do. So literally, it's going in. It's not, I want to say, the right direction, but it is starting to creep up after having a long time of slowly being steady or declining.
Well, speaking of the right direction, like, why don't you tell us now a little bit about, like, what is it like to grow up as a gay member of the church in that society? Because you're explaining about a boom that's going on in England. Maybe it's been going on since you're a child, you're talking. Sorry, I do know you just said post-COVID. So like, I'm curious about that story of, like, what is it like being a young man and growing up in this church and coming to your identity of being gay?
So, as first I start off, I only came out 2 years ago, nearly 2 years ago. So publicly out not very long, about 2 years as well. So I've only had a short experience of being openly gay in the church. But before that, I was, I was that much in denial as in Egypt. Because I was very much...
Can you say that one more time?
I was that much in denial I was in Egypt, because the River Nile.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's how much I was very much in denial, and to the point that I was nearly engaged to a woman, and that didn't work out. So growing up, I was very much like, not thinking about it. Nope, I'm trying to make it work. I want to stay in the church. I want to have a marriage. I want to have a family, all that kind of stuff. So I never really not thought about being gay, but didn't let the thoughts pass through my mind.
Do you mind if I ask, what specifically are these thoughts that you're trying to push away there?
That's a good question. It's mainly just like not letting myself think about it. That makes sense. And no, I won't think about anybody. I won't date until after my mission or anything like that, because I'm like, no, I'm going to serve a mission. I'm going to do this. So I'm like trying not avoid situations where dating or anything like that wouldn't have been an issue. But then I did date before my mission anyway. But yeah, so trying to avoid situations like, no, if I did find somebody hot, I'm like, no, I don't. It's just I'm admiring their body, because I'm like, they're better shaped than me. So I'm attracted to it. I'm jealous of it, if that makes sense. And trying to change on that point. So I'm like, no, I'm not gay. I wish I had the body like that, or I wish I looked a bit more like that. So yeah, that's the kind of thought where I was like, actually, and then later after my mission, it started like, the potential engagement fell through with the person who I was dating from before my mission and during my mission. That fell through. And then one of the main reasons is because she came out as bi and said she fancied my sister. So that was a...
What? Oh my god.
Yeah, so that was a bit much like, no thank you, can't be dealing with this right now. And that was in the last few weeks of my mission that happened. So I was like, no, can't be dealing with this. So during my mission, praying the day away, all that kind of stuff. And then this just landed on my doorstep on my mission. So I was like, okay, I now need to deal with my feelings. And to like my get out of jail free card where I could potentially get married, have a family in the church and all the times, meet the normal life in the church is not there anymore. So then at the end of my mission, it kind of, on my mission, never found an elder heart. I was like praying the day away, focusing on my mission, never focusing on thinking that anybody's like, I've got somebody back at home. I don't need to think about anything about dating or anything. So was completely focused on my mission. And then I had a district leader who I thought was hot. And it was at the last few weeks of my mission, I was like, now to deal with these emotions. And then, I actually think he's hot. And it was all like, no, I'm ready to go home. Like, I'm ready to go home for my mission because I need to get away from this and need to figure out something else in my life. So went over my mission, and then within 2 weeks I moved out. I moved to the south of England, started an apprenticeship, which an apprenticeship in the UK is a bit different in the US. So I started university and a job at the same time, and the work paid for the whole of my university. So they started paying for my university. I went to university doing engineering, and then I moved to the south of England, started working to the south of England, and just like, okay, I don't need to think about dating because I'm busy with work, busy with university. That carried on, and then I was like, try dating, even went on a date to Germany. I was like, I'm trying to be straight as much as possible. I even went on a date to Germany, to a different country, which I was like, try as much as possible. So I'm like, let's try it. And then I was like, nah, this isn't working. I'm like, I'm done with this. I'm done with trying to act straight, if that makes sense.
Pause you there. I just we've not talked about where you served, and a follow-up question for that. So why don't you let everybody know where you served at?
Yes, so I served in the France-Lyon mission.
That's the mission. Okay, so one of the things that I was thinking about is what has your experience been with LGBTQ people, whether in England or in Lyon? Like, what were you surrounded by, and what would the culture of the church towards those people in that? Yeah. Curious what, like, you have this wealth of knowledge of both countries that are quite different from each other.
So in France, if anybody's seen Mean Girls, it's the saying that the French go either way. And so the French, even though can be seen as very arrogant or anything like that, they don't really care. If you're gay, you're bi, you're straight, you're trans, they don't give two hoots. It's kind of like, you do you. It doesn't make any difference. There's not really much of an opinion if you're one way or the other, from what I noticed. But then in England, it's kind of similar, but then there are people who are a bit more extreme views, if that makes sense. Whereas like, they think really one way or think really one or the other way. And so I only really noticed it more once I came out, if that makes sense, because before I was oblivious to it, because I was like, there wasn't really, in England, normally if somebody came out, they left the church. Essentially, as soon as somebody comes out, they leave the church. And I knew some young men when I grew up who did that exact thing. I know some young women who did the exact same thing. So, and then I know some people who later on in life came out, once a person came out trans, left the church. As literally, as soon as they came out or anything changed, they left the church. Just because it can be a bit of a, not toxic situation, but it's a very unknown situation in the UK. So it was a lot more difficult, if that makes sense.
Now I'm curious, like, I've been in your situation. I've seen that with like extended family members and things like that, is they come out and they're out of the church. So I'm curious, like, did you even think like, I am like them when you were in your denial phase?
I think yes, but I didn't want to admit it to myself because that's what denial is. So I feel like yes, I was in that stage, but I would never want to admit it to myself because it's like pushing it very deep.
Yeah, it sounds like if it was anything like me, it would be like faith, right? You like
Yeah.
if I have to face that, that means I'd have to look at life outside of the church, which is quite scary, but also I don't want to give up my relationship with Christ and covenant, and it's a hard thing.
Yeah. Like for me, the church is one of the most important things in my life. So for me, I was like, I do not want to choose behind it. And if I did choose anything, I'd rather choose the church at the time when I was younger. So I'm like, I want to serve a mission. I've always wanted to serve a mission since I've been 3 years old or whatever. I've always like, I want to go on a mission. I want to go and serve a mission. I want to go abroad. I want to serve a mission. I want to, or the temple. There's not many temples in the UK. So whenever I did go to a temple, I loved it. Literally had some of the most best experiences of my life has been in the temple. So I'm like, I don't want to lose that. So I was like, I was willing to just stay in denial because in my mind, it was either one or the other. I had to choose between either staying in the church or leaving the church and being openly gay. And there was nowhere that I could, every example I've seen, I've never seen them go together. I mean, I've never seen it, somebody been gay and a member of the church. I've never seen it, never heard of it.
That's a really good parallel towards like because we were talking about dating and seeing things like that, and like with heterosexual dating, you're dating,
Yeah.
parting that out. Well, the just to pull us ahead into the future, the place where I met James, everybody was actually at the Gather conference in Utah. So you got to imagine the shock on my face as I'm working with the youth. I'm having the time of my life, and I'm also a teacher, just always trying to put out fires and just try to make sure that everything's rolling right. And then I bumped into this British guy, like, and I'm just like, "How did you end up here?" Like it's just one of this crazy thing. And now this is like my first time I'm hearing this part of your story, James. Is like you have not seen somebody who's LGBTQ and in the church, and yet somehow in 2024, I'm seeing you at the Gather conference in Utah. So can you help fill in that block? But what happened between that dating women phase and also my heart goes out to you about your ex that was going after your sister. But what a story.
Yeah, so to fill in the gap is, so as I was saying about the district leader I had a crush on, a few years later he came out publicly on social media. And yeah, and I sent a message saying, sames, or a bit more than that, but I literally sent a message to him saying, same. And I was like, and then, yeah, so I was like, quite shocked because in my mission, I was like, oh, nobody's gay. There was actually one person who was out as bi on my mission, but they're like, yeah, but I'm just gonna date a guy and stuff like that. So it's like they were bi, but not dating women or anything. They were just dating men because she was, she wanted to have a heteronormative relationship. And so I was like, that's the only person I kind of seen. So I was like, but then this other came out. And then over the next a few weeks, I've just found about 8 other people from my mission who came out. And I was like, oh, there's a lot more gays in my mission than I thought there was. So I was like, okay. So I started speaking to this district leader I had and talking about like everything. And he was like, here's the question at the time, Question from the Closet podcast. Showed me, and it was just after just before the Gather conference in 2023. I was like, I have not got the money to fly to Utah at the moment. It's expensive, and I'm like, I've not got the money, and I've not got the time to book off work either. So I was like, okay, and I was like, hopefully there's one next year, because at the time it was unknown if there was going to be multiple to just before this one. So I was like, hopefully there's one next year, and if so, I'm going to come to it. So I was like, okay, I'm going to plan to come to it. And at this point, I was saying I'm planning to come to it even before coming out to my parents or anybody else. So I'm like, I need to experience this because I'm
going to come to the Gather conference before you'd even come out to your family. You're willing to fly to another country before you come out to your family?
I'm not normal. So yes, I was literally like, if that's how it works out, and if that helps me figure out how I can come between how I can line up being gay and a member of the church. If that helps it, I'll fly to another country. I'll do whatever to try and figure out before having to pull off the band-aid with coming out to my family. So So that happened, and then a few weeks later, I came out to some friends, and then a month later, came out to my mum, and then my family, and then within a few weeks, I came out publicly. So for most people who normally have a long journey of coming out, where they tell somebody a few months later, maybe tell somebody else, mine was in total less than 4 months, and because being neurodivergent, once I lined all my ducks up, I just let them all go. So I binge watched Questions from the Closet whilst driving to work every morning, and it's an hour each way for work, so that's an episode each way. So within a month, I think I've listened to most of the episodes, and then and then with everything, it just like it all makes sense. I can see where it all lies. Yeah, now it's let it go. I'm just like I figured it out. Now other people can figure it out, and it's their problem now because I'm happy where I am.
Wow. Wow. And now here you are on the rebranded Questions from the Closet on how, like, being all out in the open. And here you are literally being out in the open. You found something that works for you. And I like that is just so heartwarming to hear at the age of 24. If I'm being honest about my own spiritual journey, I think I go like I'm doing well one week and then the other week I'm not doing too well, and then I'm gonna be on a spiritual high for a bit. So I'm curious now about this life as a high counselor and all that stuff. Like how would you describe where you're at spiritually in your journey?
So a lot of it has helped with coming out to start off with. Coming out was a huge testimony builder for me, if that makes sense, because I learned so much in that coming out journey, and especially just a few months after coming out, that built my testimony so much. I'm like, it's probably more spiritual testimony building than my actual mission, because so within a month of coming out, I got a message from a member of the state high council, state presidency in my state, saying, "Oh, can we have a meeting?" I was like, "Yeah." He used to be part of the bishopric a few just prior to it, so I thought he's still part of the bishop. So I completely forgot he's now part of the state presidency. I was like, yeah, I'll have a meeting with you. Might get a YSA calling, I'm currently serving in your men's, I might just get a different calling or something else might be happening. So yeah. And I was on the way to the meeting, I was like, oh, he's not part of the bishopric anymore, he's part of the state presidency. So I was like, oh, what calling might it be? Why did you want to meet? Like, is it because I came out? I was like literally a bit stressing about going to this meeting and stuff. And he's like, oh, I want to read from the handbook. And I was like, all right, what are you going to read from the handbook? Because on my mission, and after I read the handbook back to forward and backwards, and any way you could read it, just to make sure that being gay and a member was fine. So I've read every part of it. And he's like, oh, can we read from this section? And he then read the section about being a state high councillor. I was like, all right, why are you reading this to me? And he's like, oh, we want to extend the call to you to be a state high councillor. And I was like, okay. He's like, do you accept it? I'm like, yes. And he's like, do you have any thoughts? I'm like, yes, you do know I'm gay. Like, so in my mind, I was like, state high councillors are normally a 40, 50, 60-year-old guy who's married with a few kids, working, got his life settled down, a house, all that kind of stuff, pretty solid in church. So that, in my mind, that's what a state high councillor was. Somebody like my dad. Not a 23-year-old gay guy. Was not what I expected a state high councillor to be. So I went to him, you do know I'm gay? And he went, you do know I'm straight? And that just shut me straight up. So I'm like, all right. He's like, he's not got a problem with it. The state doesn't have a problem with it. So I was like, yeah, I'll serve. So then I set apart, and then that was an interesting experience to go into my first meeting of literally, because at the time I had dyed hair. I had red hair at the time. Yeah, not a normal colour for a state high councillor. I also often wear a pink suit to church. So I went to my first state high council meeting with red hair and a pink suit. And yes, I stood out a bit like a sore thumb. It was not the normal state high councillor. So with that, it was interesting because every single time I did speaking assignments, I was on my colourful suits, and then they were like, "Oh, you're Brother Grant." I'm like, "Yeah, I'm Brother Grant," and I was like, "Not what you expected, was it?" And like, "No, not in a million years. No offense, but not in a million years is what I would expect to be coming to do the speaking assignment."
I was curious. You hinted on this about neurodivergency, and sometimes with neurodivergency we can have like the in some situations, wherever you're on the spectrum, we may not be aware socially how we're perceived. I don't know if that would be your experience, but to be in a high counselor calling with red hair, cake suit, and things like that, did you pick up on anything social around you that was ever concerning, or was it just no? Ever get just
It wasn't. It wasn't nothing really concerning. It was just the best thing was looking at people nearly having an aneurysm, trying to figure me out because they don't. They're like that. Doesn't. They just. It's such a bit of a shell shock for people to have such a difference, if that makes sense. Because there's another member of the state council in my state who's a 24-year-old as well. So it's like, okay, there's another younger person in the state council, but not one who is as flamboyant and crazy or chaotic as I am. So it's kind of interesting that there's a few people who literally you could just see like the brain just ticking over to try and like, how does this work? How it's like trying to figure out. And at this point, they didn't even know I was gay yet either. So they were just like, this is what I'm getting. And they didn't even know I'm gay yet either. So with some of them, when I then came out as gay, they just saw the same mechanisms trying to turn over and like, how does this work? How does this? It was never a negative, really. There wasn't really many negative experiences. It was just mainly people were just confused and a bit shell-shocked.
Now, how long have you been in this column for?
Nearly about a year and a half.
Year and a half. Okay. My question is now, like, especially you probably your first couple of months, you're just trying to just lay low and try to wrap. Gay people we're used to doing that.
Yeah.
But like, I'm curious, like, what are some insights or things that you've been able to share at the table? Like, we don't have to go into like deep detail about disciplinary councils or anything like that, but what are some perspectives that you have shared in the High Council that have, or with the state presidency, that you feel has been helpful?
One that just comes to mind is we had a meeting literally on Thursday, just gone, and we were talking about an activity or something, and we were talking about literally a discussion around a topic where it's like we're talking about it, we're just missing the middle bit of point. And I was like, one topic that's especially at FSY and stuff in the UK, has been trying to like been their driving point of it is like, come as you are. They'd rather have you come than not come at all. No matter what your situation is, who you are, they'd rather you come and feed on the gospel and feast upon the words of Christ and actually not come because, people might think of this, people might think this. So I shared that topic and everyone's like, yeah, that's good. Let's kind of pinpoint that as like a thing. And then that was one experience I can remember, and it was just accepting like, yeah, we love that idea. That's a good idea, kind of. And then the other one is it wasn't really at stake like anything to our calling, but I was speaking with one of the state presidency, and I had a prompting to do something in a talk, which I would never have done in a million years, and that was to come out in a talk on a speaking assignment. I was like, I would not come. As a state council, I'm like, you never say a state council coming out in a talk. You never have anybody really coming out in a talk. So I was like, okay, why am I getting this prompting? And then I kept on planning the talk, and it's same prompting. You need to come out and you talk. You need to come out and you talk. I'm like, no, I'm not coming out my talk. I am not coming out in my talk because that's something I would never do in my life. Because that just sounds scary. Because especially it's an award that I've never been to yet. So I've never been to the ward. I don't know anybody in this ward. I've heard a few stories about this ward where it's an interesting ward already, and I need to come out in this ward. So I was literally like, no, never doing this. And then I kept on getting prompting, so I was like, okay, I'll call somebody from the state presidency, and I'll chat with him just to see. He might tell me no, and it's just that he said, oh no, don't do it. Something I'm fine with that. Let's see if trying to get out of it, if that makes sense. So gave him a call, and he's literally like, well, I'm so thankful for your day and serving as who you are, to being who you are in your calling. So yeah, feel free to come out and talk. I was like, I don't want that response. I wanted you to say, no, don't come out and talk, because I didn't want to come out and not talk. But he was like, no, come out and talk. It'll be awesome. There's a reason why you felt the prompting, and we support you as a state council, state presidency. You should come out and you talk. I was like, okay, I didn't expect that response. And he was literally, then he shared a story about his family and how he has a member of his family who's LGBTQ, and he's like, oh, I wish there were more people like you, because being who you are, because we need everybody in the church who are gay, who are straight. No matter who you are, you need to be in this church, because the church is for everybody. And that's kind of what the topic of my talk that I got assigned was based on Elder Kieran's talk from General Conference, Welcome to the Church of Joy. And so I was like, okay, me coming out, the church is for everybody, the church is to joy for everybody. So I'm like, okay, that's my talk. And so I was like, I still was like, no, I still don't want to come out in my talk. So I called the bishop of the ward I was in. So I'm like, I'm going to give him a heads up, just because I feel like it's a bit of a fair thing to give him as a heads up as a bishop that somebody's going to come out in a talk, because you don't often get that experience ever really. So I gave him a call. I was like, I'm not asking for your permission. I'm just running it by you, just in case you have any thoughts or anything about me, about the thing. I was like, so just to give you a bit of a backstory, I'm gay, by the way, and explained all that situation. I was like, so I also had a prompting to come out in my talk. I was like, have you got any guidance? Because you know the ward better than I do. And he's like, well, if you feel like that's a prompting, follow it. And as long as you focus on the Saviour, and that's all that matters. So I was like, okay, I guess I'm coming out of my talk. I guess that's what I'm doing then. I've got my response. Okay, I'm going to listen to you more. I'm going to listen to the answer to my prayers more. I need to not try and get out of it. Okay, I guess I'm coming out of my talk. And then came out of my talk, which was nerve-wracking to say the least. And it wasn't even to a big ward. It was probably about 50 people. So it wasn't really that big of a ward. But I was still bricking it, to say the least. And it was also happened to be the same week as a baby's blessing. So there was a lot of visitors who didn't know me at all. So I was like, I don't know anybody here, especially a lot of them are visitors. So came out in my talk, and at the end of it, a guy came up to me who I've never met before and never met since. He's like, can I just give you a hug? I'm like, I loved your talk. Can I just give you a hug? I'm like, yeah, okay. I'll give you a hug. And then went and then never saw him again. So I don't know why I had the prompting to come out in my talk. I don't know if it was for me or for him or for anybody, but it was beneficial to such an interesting experience as I would never have got as a state high councillor if I wasn't a state high councillor. But it's built such a testimony for me that, yeah, you can be gay in the church, you can be whoever you are in the church, and people need to be who they are in the church. So the Gospels are such a personal thing, but it's for everybody.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about a story. I can't remember if I shared this on this podcast before, but like when you feel prompted to just share about like being gay or coming out into a talk, like, and you're just like, I don't know why I got prompted. I don't know who's listening to this or it. I think one of the things that we do in the church is we look for the miracle story, especially when you're on the mission. You're trying to find that miracle story, so you to report it back to everybody. Like, hey, here's our miracle. And sometimes we force the narrative of a miracle, even though it's not fully developed. And then that guy that got like set for baptism is actually kind of nuts. You know, let's all think what happened pretty regularly in my mission. I was in New Zealand, but not that matters. But it was sort of like moving my mind. When you were sharing that, was my dad. He served as a mission in New York City, and he had this. Yeah, I think I did tell the story. He had a traveling companion, and they were supposed to go to their dinner appointment, but then he got prompted like, oh, maybe we shouldn't go, and he tells his traveling companion like, he feels bad about telling his traveling companion that like, hey, we're not gonna get food tonight, and it's not often to get dinners in New York City. And he turns to his man. He's like, "Hey, I'm getting a bad feeling about this dinner. Can we cancel it?" And he's like, "You feel that way too?" And so they both had the same prompting, so they canceled it. And then my dad, when he's telling me the story, is like, "Hey, like, do you know why? Do you know what would have happened to us if we went to that dinner appointment?" And I'm leaning in now. I'm like, "Yeah, that tell me what happens next." He's like, I don't know. I don't know what we avoided. I just know that we follow the prompting. And I just think I think that's a big thing that we're missing a lot of the narratives culturally in the church is we need to hear more stories like what you said. It's like, hey, I felt a prompting to come out and share this at a talk. And I don't know if it helped. I don't know where it went to, but it felt right. And you may never, ever get to see the ripple effect of the good that you've done.
Exactly. You never know what answer to a prayer does, because sometimes it affects you, sometimes it affects somebody else, sometimes it doesn't happen until years later.
So now that we're coming towards the end of our podcast now, I think I'd just like to turn the time over to you, James, and just like share where's your testimony at now on your journey? What does it look like today? And then if you have any final thoughts.
Yeah, so one thing that goes along the same kind of like answering, listening to response to a prayer is, so the last few years I've served as an FSY counsellor. And in England, it's very different to the US, because in the US you can do like 6 weeks in a row and it's paid for, and get paid for it. In the UK, it's completely voluntary. So I literally took time off work. I went and served a bunch of youth who gave me no sleep and anxiety through the roof, and I went and served. And the last few years as a counsellor, I've been a one-to-one, which is I'm a counsellor for a youth with extra needs. With extra needs that he may not be able to FSY if I wasn't there, because I helped him in certain ways. And literally about just before I came out to anybody first, I get to getting this prompting, which I'm like, I need to have a different colour. I need to dye my hair. Weirdest prompting to a prayer I've ever had. I was like, how can I help this kid dye your hair? Kept on getting the same response. I'm like, I'm not dyeing my hair. Like, I'm not doing that. Like, I'm never going to do it in a million years, dye my hair. So keeps getting the same prompting. And it's like, no, you need to dye your hair a different colour every day. So not even just one colour. Every day I need to change the colour of my hair. I'm like, I'm not doing this. I'm not going through all that time and effort to change my hair colour every day. Kept on getting the response. I'm like, okay, I'll do it. I'm getting the same response over and over. I'm just going to do it. So I did it. And at FSY, there was an experience where this young man, he got overwhelmed by his emotions and literally started like, could not go grounding technique. And I'm a mental health first aider, and I've done training with mental health and stuff like that, a bit of mental health. So I'm like, I know grounding techniques. I know how to ground people with grounding techniques. Tried them all and not.
The term that you're saying there, I'm not sure if I'm familiar with it.
Grounding techniques. So when somebody's like having like a panic attack, you ground them to like set them back to, not chill them out, but get them to where you're able to have a conversation, able to talk. So distraction, or to tell them to breathe, like control their breathing. Loads of different techniques, and I tried loads of them to try and get him to not having this overwhelmed crying, sobbing, and stuff like that. I tried everything to help him to take back control, if that makes sense, of the situation. Nothing was working. Tried everything, and I was like, do you want to know what colour? I felt prompted to just say, do you know what colour my hair is going to be tomorrow? And within a second, it was like that. He completely grounded. He completely like stopped crying. Breathing was under control, everything. And just because what colour my hair was going to be the next day. So I was the counsellor again for the same youth for the following year, and I did the same thing. I was like, I'm going to dye my hair a different colour every day. And at this time, I was out. I was now out. And so I wore a rainbow ring and I had rainbow Converse. I'm like, that's enough rainbow for me. I'm like, I'm not a person to have a lot of rainbow and stuff like that. I'm like, I have a rainbow band on my watch, and that's about enough rainbow for me. I'm not one that goes head to toe in rainbow. It's not my style. So I had some rainbow on me, and it was like, okay, I was being me, had a different colour every day. And my parents and my granddad own an LDS sports store in the UK. So there's only one in Europe, and we're the one that own it. And during the FSY, there was one of the Area 70 walked in, and was having a chat with my mum, and we were talking about FSY, and like FSY is an amazing experience. Like we love it because there's some counsellors who have gone above and beyond about being inclusive, and driving the thought of inclusivity, and like showing that anybody can come. This mentality of come as you are. And so my mum was listening along to it and stuff like that. And it's like, oh yeah, there's one who's literally like dyeing his hair different colours every day. And my mum's reaction was apparently like, okay, yeah, I think I know where this is going. And so it's like, so the Area 70 opened his phone, and he's like, oh, there's a photo of him in the Area 70 WhatsApp group chat. So he was scrolling back and showed a photo of me to my mother. I was like, oh, this is the YSA he's doing it. And my mum's like, that is my son. And he's like, oh no, that's awesome. Tell him he's doing an amazing job. He's literally like the best thing about inclusivity and everything. And mum was like, okay. And then my mum then told my story to him, and then told him about my experience of coming out and now serving a statewide council and all my experience of coming out. And then he's like, oh, that's amazing. I'm going to tell it back to the Area 70. So I was like, nope, I did not want my story to be shared in the Area 70 WhatsApp group chat. not at all. That was not something I wanted. And so apparently he went on carrying shopping and then went back to my mum and actually is like, actually, I'm going to tell the brethren, meaning the quorum of the 12 apostles. He said he's going to relay this message about me to the quorum of the 12 apostles. And I'm like, no, I did not like that at all, because it's like the big bosses knowing your name. You never want to be known by the big bosses at work. And that's what it felt like. But I was like, actually, looking back, that's amazing how the church culture is changing, how this Area 70 was excited to hear about me coming out, excited to hear about I'm still in the gospel, that I found a way to belong in the church and be congruent with who I am, and be exactly who I am, and not be ashamed or hiding it or anything like that. But I found how they both line together. And so that's quite cool how I find the culture of the church, or I've noticed it a lot more since coming out, how it is changing, where there are people who are coming out as gay who are staying in the church. And at FSY, I had an experience where, okay, I was wearing a ring, I was wearing some rainbow shoes, and that's the only thing that was really overly presenting a rainbow. But some people did notice that, and one of the other counsellors came out to me, and he's like, "I've not told anybody, and not really told anybody really, but I'm gay." And literally we had a discussion about it, and it was such an amazing experience where actually me being who I was, even though showing it a little bit, actually I wasn't expecting people to come out with me. I wasn't expecting to have this experience with the Area 70. I was just being myself, but it's such a cool blessing to see that people have noticed it, and the culture is learning, and people are changing, and to be more opening and welcoming for those who don't fit the norm.
Now, I've been really moved today by the consistency, actually, of your leadership. This is not, we've talked about this on this podcast. Charlie Bent has talked about this a lot, about leadership roulette. You just never know who you're going to get. And like, you have gotten some stellar leadership in your stake level, the bishop that you spoke in his ward, and now the Area 70. It's just, you're right. This is very hopeful to that the culture is changing. And I think that's something that I personally really needed to hear. There have been some Sundays where I feel like I want to hide on the staircase by the stage while sacrament meeting is going on, but it's happened a couple of times. And so for you to share about that really does give me some hope. Thank you for sharing that, James. Before we're out of here, let me ask, before you close with your testimony and final thoughts, further thoughts, is stretching back to Gather and listening to this podcast, like what was it that you gained from listening to Questions from Closet or going to the Gather conference that gave you the foundation to come out in that 4-month period that you described? What was it that you got out of that?
So being neurodivergent, I think pretty black and white sometimes. If once it makes sense, it makes sense. Until it makes sense, it takes a bit of time. So one thing that a lot of things I learned was, like, as soon as they said something and it's like, or the penny dropped, I'm like, I'm fine with that now. I'm like, that makes sense. Let's move on to the next step. And one of the things that it was this 6 stage, like the stage just coming out, was one of the episodes that hit a lot with me, because I was like, that's me. Like, I can see myself in some of them. Like, it hit home a bit too close on some of the points. And one thing I learned from that is the importance of grace and charity, especially inside that experience of coming out, on both yourself. You need to have grace on yourself, you need to have charity for yourself, but also others around you, because there's a lot of, I'm very blessed in my situation of the relationship that I have with my mum, especially because I threw her in the deep end, literally. I came out, and then within a few weeks, she had to then deal with questions from bishops in my parents' ward and stuff like that, and some of them were not, I had majority good reactions, but there were some interesting reactions, to say the least. So she was literally thrown in the deep end, which I'm a bit sorry for, but it happened. And me and my mum have a good relationship where no matter what we say, we have grace in it. Whereas, like, she can say whatever she wants. she can say whatever she wants, and I do not take offense from it. I can say whatever I want, and we don't take offense from it. And if there's offense, we just sit back in for a minute, and then we talk about it after to be like, okay, why do we feel this way? Why do we feel this way? Instead of just getting overwhelmed with emotions or anything like that, we just like, nope, let's take a moment to chill and then let's discuss it. And one of the things that happened was my mum came to gather with me. So I didn't go by myself. So my mum, I dragged on a plane to America when she was expecting to get a hip replacement a few months after. So she was not comfortable on the plane at all, but I dragged her to the US to come to the Gather conference. And there's a few experiences where she was a bit shell-shocked because it was not what she expected at all. Because she's like, I don't know what I'm expecting. She was more nervous about it than I was. She was more nervous about what to expect than I was. And she was talking about it. And every time on the way back after the Gather conference, we were talking about stuff. And literally, we could say whatever we want. We had so much grace and space for each other in that conversation where it's like, we could say whatever we want. And then we discussed it. And like, why do we feel this way? Why do we see one way or another? And one thing we discussed a lot, which helped a lot with me, was two things where it's like, at the Gather conference was the only place ever in the church that I did not feel any judgment. And my mum felt the same thing. As somebody who's not the norm or not the one who is aimed at the Gather conference, she still felt not judged at all. She was literally like, normally she's like, oh, sometimes I go to church and I felt judged in this way or that way or this way. And she's like, there was no judgment at all. There's literally not an ounce of judgment there. She was like, it was so uplifting. She said it was uplifting for her and she felt it was amazing because there was no judgment. And she's like, in a place where you would expect there'll be so much difficulty and stuff like that, where it's like people who are for her, she thought so on the margins, that it must be so difficult, but there was no judgment at all. And then the other thing we discussed was with the scriptures that say, if two or more are gathered in my name, there I'll be also. And the spiritual experience at Gather, even though it wasn't at church or anything like that, but the spirit was still there. The spirit was there because I felt it and so did my mum. It wasn't just me saying, oh, I felt the spirit. My mum felt the spirit. We had a good experience. And then whilst we were over there, we had meetings with some of the suppliers for the bookstore we own as well. And one was Deseret News. So we had a meeting with Deseret, and my mum was meant to go there for mainly business purposes. But we spent probably this hour and a half meeting we had, majority of talking about Gather conference and talking about the uplifting experience that Gather conference was. So we went to have a meeting about important stuff for a business, but we spoke more about the Gather conference because of how uplifting it was and how amazing an experience it was. So it impacted me a lot just going to Gather because that built a lot of my testimony. It was like, actually, yeah, you can belong to the church. You can feel the spirit still as being gay. You can still have all these amazing experiences, even though you're gay. It doesn't exclude you from anything. It doesn't exclude you from the gospel. It doesn't exclude you from anything. It actually is an extra piece for the puzzle, if that makes sense. It actually builds on it. And from that, I get my testimony, not that it's founded full in the fact that I'm gay, but it has been so magnified because I'm gay. Because I'm gay, I know I'm a child of God more. Because I'm gay, I know more my worth. Because I'm gay, I can find the tender mercies in the gospel. I can find the charity and love for other people. Just because everything is not founded until I'm gay, but it's been magnified because of my identity and accepting my identity instead of thinking it's something that I should have shame about. It's actually something I should love and grow about.
And I think we can cover off with that every on that. But I feel like I should still ask anyway. That was very powerful what you shared there. Thank you for sharing your experience with your mom there. Do you have anything else or any advice that you have for any of our? I think you and I both work with youth. Do you have any wisdom that you'd like to share with LGBTQ youth?
One of the things that I always go back to, especially like FSY, or one thing I try to teach any youth I work with and stuff, is that you are a child of God. That's the most fundamental part of anything on this that matters on this earth, is you're a child of God. That is the only thing that carries worth, if that makes sense. It carries all the worth, and that's the only thing that carries the worth. Nothing else determines your worth other than that fact that you're a child of God. And literally when I came out on my post, that's what I started it with. To the point that Instagram shortened it, so nobody found out that I was gay. They just thought it was a post about me talking about I'm a child of God. So I had a lot of conversations about my post after that people didn't expect. They didn't expect me to be. They're like, "What are you on about? You gay?" I'm like, "Did you not read my post? I'm like, you liked it?" Like, yeah, I only saw the fact you're talking about a child of God. But that's the most important thing. Nothing else matters other than that you're a child of God, which sometimes can be difficult to actually know that truth. Does that make sense? Especially in experiences where you don't always feel love, you don't always feel acceptance. And in my experience of coming out, there have been some times where I have had people who said some negative things, but I always leant back on that. Actually, they don't know me. They don't know me as much as God knows me. And God knows me a lot more than they do. And he has worth. He knows how much I'm worth. And he knows I have that much potential and worth that he sent his son to sacrifice for us. That's how much potential I have, that he's willing to send his son to sacrifice for us. That's what I found so much, that built so much of my testimony, is that fact that we are all children of a beloved Heavenly Father, no matter who we are.
Fantastically said, James. Thank you for coming on Out and About and for sharing your story with us and teaching us all there is to know about, really all there is to know all about what it's like to be gay in England, and as an active high counselor, and that's just spreading the good news. Thank you for your hope. Thank you for your spirit. And thank you to everybody for tuning into this episode of Out and About. Take care.
Thank you very much. Bye.